This is a story of addiction. Your life around you is getting more and more chaotic and going further and further down this downward spiral, and you can't break the pattern.
I adapted Luke Davies' novel, Candy, a novel about love and addiction. When you love something so much, you want to consume it in as many different mediums as possible. I wanted it in three-dimensional life on stage.
It follows two sort of lead characters that are really in love, and they're essentially at the same time getting addicted to heroin and then trying to come off heroin.
The play is told through the main character's point of view.
Dan is an addict. It would be easy to look at it as a very sad, horrible life, but what's interesting about Dan is he's looking at the most creative way of a situation, whether it's something terrible happening to him or scamming someone.
And the play starts with Candy in her early 20s. She's an art student, she's just moved to Sydney. She comes from quite a sort of modest background. She's desperate for some freedom to experience life. She's falling in love with Dan, and she kind of gets carried away with the curiosity of wanting to try new things.
The first character I'm playing is Mrs. Wyatt, and she's Candy's mother in the play. She has quite a difficult relationship with her daughter. She is kind of thrust into this situation where her daughter is becoming an addict, and she becomes increasingly powerless, and she feels a whole range of emotions, anger, frustration. There's a few instances in the play where she addresses that she's trying to help her daughter, but the way she goes about it and seem quite controlling and unkind.
I play Schumann, who's a friend of Candy and Dan, Mr. Wyatt, Candy's dad, and then Casper, who's also a friend of Dan and Candy. The challenge of playing multiple parts is just getting the differences. You can't rest on yourself too much. You've got to go to different parts of yourself and amplify them, trying to hone in on an aspect of them that feels real to you and something that excites you.
It's been quite a challenge for me because I've never had to do like multi-role before.
As soon as we came into the rehearsal room, we spent the next 2 weeks blocking the whole show. So much changes throughout the rehearsal process with music or the set changes, and I didn't want to get too bogged down in getting things set. I wanted to allow us to remain malleable until pretty much right up until the tech run.
Ideas just come out of nowhere. They come when you're in the middle of a scene or when you're reflecting, and they come when you're like bouncing ideas of other people.
A lot of my prep and stuff is done at home, and so it's like it's all here in the head. Rehearsing is just a chance to like screw up, try it a different way, or maybe this isn't what the scene is about. Sometimes you have to look like an absolute fool in order to get to the good stuff.
It feels very collaborative and easy and no pressure. It feels like a good space to try things out, talk about things.
For me, it's just about like doing it lots of times and like seeing what comes up.
Keep doing it over and over and over. Who knows what more you might find the deeper you go.
But that also allowed me as a director to sort of get a sense in how each actor worked and what they might need going forward when it does come time to sharpening up performances. Now we're in the really fun part of the rehearsal process where we're using lots of different techniques and exercises to sort of elevate what we've blocked. Lydia did like an incredible week of animal work with us, which was incredibly fun, I think, especially for Candy and Dan, working out how can they physicalize the effect of 6 years of heroin abuse.
The animal exercise for me was a bit of a game changer, because before that I was working based on my script analysis and all of that, which is great, but I hadn't properly got into my body yet. And the animal exercise just really helped get me out of my head, not think at all about what I looked like or what this actually meant or if it was that right for Candy, and just completely going for it.
We had Goldie, a good friend of mine who's an incredible movement coach. He came in to sort of work with the actors to help loosen them up.
Maybe a little bit more movement on the spot. There you go!
We also had Alan Dunnett, who is an incredible acting coach. By the end of week 3, we were doing a stumble through of the whole performance. Week 4, we had an intimacy coordinator, Georgina, come and work with us. She was just absolutely incredible in creating chemistry in a really safe, organic way with the cast. Week 5, we're now at a point where we're running it. I'm still jumping in and we're still tweaking things and blocking is still changing every now and then, but it's now about the cast getting confident in the flow of the show.
We're doing tech today. We've got Cam with us doing lighting and sound. Yeah, this is our first tech day. Excited.
I think the warehouse lighting state in Melbourne would probably be the same. For the Yellow Jesus relapse.
Yeah.
Okay. The hospital lighting state, very clinical.
Preparation and research is super, super important. Well, with all the roles, but especially with something like this, because we're not really trying to glorify addiction, we're really just trying to show it for what it is. And to not take that seriously would just be disrespectful for the thousands and thousands of people that this affects. Understanding the specifics of addiction, there's a lot of great material online and documentaries which very honestly and realistically take you through what it's like, that lifestyle. And that was the main way in. I watched Panic in Needle Park, I watched Heaven Knows What, Ben, The Diary of a Heroin Addict. I found when I read the novel, it took a lot of the fear away. It felt so clear and it felt like not overcomplicated. I think that's through Luke Davies' writing as well. It just seems so honest and understandable.
Researching what was around at the time so you can just immerse yourself in that world and really understand the culture and what people kind of cared about at the time, what people were thinking at the time.
Looking into my own life, seeing what sort of experiences are there that might relate. If there are, use those. If not, read as much as possible. Talk to people that might have more of an understanding of the situation than I do. Because if you really don't know about the subject matter, there's so much to understand.
Addiction can affect anyone. It doesn't matter where you come from or the life experience you've had. Heroin addiction is probably considered one of, if not the most intense addiction someone can have.
It's not really about getting high. Once you get to past a certain phase in addiction, it's just more ignoring this reality that you've built for yourself.
Everyone knows it's such a complicated thing. Withdrawing from heroin is so difficult. Trying to find that within myself, like the bodily sensations, is quite tricky. Get into character. The most important thing for me before I've even started is definitely just voice and relaxation exercises, because I think I can't really let loose and kind of start from scratch without that. And then I love music because you can just be really silly.
It's about sharpening their reaction muscle and being able to observe and react in the moment and not getting stuck in ways of rehearsing and performing.
Whatever impulse comes up, you can just play with, but it really helps bring out other alternatives for a scene that perhaps you hadn't thought about.
To me, Meisner is the best method of allowing the actors to feel comfortable that if things don't work out as they expect on the night of the performance, they can trust each other to sort of like veer it back into where it needs to be. Every actor is so different in their approach, and what works for one actor might not necessarily work for another.
I say one thing that's always a constant is there's always some form of book or journal, which, you know, with Dan, it's literally is in the story, he has a journal. But I find that through characters, that's a good way in. You can very much personalize it to yourself when you're writing these entries because nobody else is really going to read it. It's just for you. Dan, either he's in the scene and he's interacting with the other characters or he's interacting with the audience. I never had to do like anything where I've broken the fourth wall before. At first, I had no idea what I was doing. I just was reading the lines, almost thinking of it like a voiceover in a movie, narrating it. And I just found that so dull. I don't know if I've fully got there yet, but you discover that you need to not treat it so differently as a scene, you know. The audience, you still need to like affect them, have a reaction and have them affect you, have this sort of, you know, Meisner-ish back and forth with them.
They need to sort of colour their characterisation and performance as much as possible by answering Stanislavski's fundamental questions, not just pretend really, like have motives and an understanding as to why their characters are doing the things they're doing.
Just trying to find where like the frustration and the anger comes from in the character, because she does have a lot of intense moments in the play. Establishing what they want, also like contradictions in the character, because everyone's multifaceted. I've been looking at the barn a lot, just like trying to differentiate the physicalities between all the different characters. What's like the purpose of the character in the story, Also creating like a little backstory for the character, establishing her relationship with Conor's, like my husband in the play, has been helpful.
This is the thing that changed my acting more than anything else. Right before bed, you're in a sort of relaxed state, try and sort of like calm myself down as much as I can. Then I'll go into the situation in my head and try and feel the extreme of what the character is feeling in that moment. I'm really imagining what the other character is saying to me and trying to get that as real as possible, feel the feelings, and then go for my lines. And whenever it doesn't feel like my response makes sense or it feels right, keep going back over that.
One of the challenges actually of the production is we have the most minimal budget to create an 80s aesthetic, but I've just been lucky to have a set designer, Sats, who's come on this journey with me. So it's pretty much just hunting and gathering whatever we can.
The space in the old Red Lion was restricted and also very intimate. We couldn't have too many things on the set. We did have a lot of props and we had to pare everything back. It's constantly evolving and moving. We had a bath which had wheels and we had a table which had wheels, and a lot of the action happened around that table with the characters Candy and Dan. The writing on the wall had lines from the book, lines from the adapted script by Kate Elliott. It was a really easy way of allowing the audience to be in Dan and Candy's, not just environment, but also in their heads. Definitely nod to Dan's journal. The majority of the costumes were sourced from charity shops, and we also had the actors wearing their own clothes as well. Dan's costume, Kyle actually wore his clothes, which was great because he was actually rehearsing in his trainers. He was comfortable in them, and it was really about the comfort of the actors. He couldn't leave the stage, and his costume had to be very simple. So it was just a white t-shirt and a pair of jeans, and he was able to put layers on. So for the wedding scene, he has a black jacket and a bow tie, which actually was his idea. Candy only had 3 costumes. So she had the initial costume, which needed to show her being very young and vulnerable and quite girly. The second costume was a wedding dress. Then the last costume represented her a demise in taking drugs, which was just a tracksuit bottom and a baggy t-shirt. She didn't care about the way she looked because it was all about the drugs. What I did have to think about with Candy's costume is that she is very physical on set, so she needed to be able to be on the floor. Initially, I did think about a dress for her, but I didn't want her to feel exposed or uncomfortable with what she was wearing. So the first outfit was a pink jumpsuit, and it enabled her to have ease with her movement and not feel restricted in any way. Bridget played Dirty Julie, Mrs. Wyatt and the Doctor, so the costumes obviously were very different. Mrs. Wyatt was very tense. Obviously her daughter is a drug addict and it's kind of very gently swept under the carpet. 80s Australia, conservative dress. And for her third character, she played the Doctor, which is just the doctor's coat over her dress. So then we used her hair to also differentiate between the characters. Conor plays Schumann, Mr. Wyatt and Casper. Again, we needed 3 distinct characters and 3 distinct looks, and also 3 distinct age ranges. So Schumann being young and very high on drugs, we decided to go something long-sleeved. If he was an addict, he would obviously have markings on his arms, so it's about covering those up. A little bit of an unkept look. Mr. Wyatt was dressed more formally, again, conservative. Casper, being a university lecturer, he was also a functioning drug addict. The bag, the satchel across his chest, it also gave him a prop to play with and then rummage in when he had his yellow Jesus. The budget was a big challenge, it being a tight budget, not overspending, but I really did enjoy the fact you really had to think on your feet. So you really want to make it work because everybody is so generous with their time and with their enthusiasm and their passion. So it was an added incentive to ensure it worked.
And I think it's something that I actually quite enjoy about fringe theatre. The fact that it is low budget means that you do have to collaborate more. No one can just be left to their own devices and go and do their job. You have to all have conversations about everything and make sure communication is super, super clear.
Obviously, there's nerves to do the show and everything, but it's such a collaborative process coming like this with the other cast, because for some of us it's our first time working together, but there's this insane amount of trust that we have with one another.
Getting in a room, having no other distractions, it's just you and everybody else and their creative minds coming together. it's just my favourite thing.
I was very fortunate that I have the most incredible cast and I feel very fulfilled. Every day there is so much to do. My brain is sort of often going at 100 miles per hour, but I love it, and I am actually now starting to get to the point like, am I going to be okay when this ends? Am I going to be really sad?